Good evening, Mr. David Hart, back on the podcast again. How we doing, sir? Doing
To
good?
be back. Yes, sir.
To be
Happy to
back?
be back.
Sounds good. I'm
Excited.
glad to have you
Excited.
back. Yeah, excited to be back. That's good. That's good stuff. Yeah, I'm excited to have you back here. I'm currently still in Seville, as you can see in the background. Gonna be here until June, and the last week here I'm probably gonna spend with this guy. So I'm very excited. Yeah, that we're still in touch, that we still can keep in touch after 6 years, 7 years that we already know each other, which is crazy to me. Because yeah, it seems actually even longer, but it's also crazy that it's been already 7 years that yeah, we first met. And yeah, part of like keeping this friendship, of course, is I think a very open mind and yeah, kind of a commitment to that friendship as well, which goes along with honesty and I think also being open with your emotion, kind of, because I think having a true friendship that you can share anything within also requires opening up about your emotion at some point. I mean, not in case that you're forced to do that, but it just comes kind of naturally. And through talking about that and talking about David being back on the podcast, we kind of came to the idea of talking about certain things that are connected to what I just said. I don't even want to make any more introduction about what we're going to talk about. I just want to naturally let it flow. And yeah, excited to talk to you about that. One quick introduction I wanna do though is I know I mentioned this guy a lot on the podcast in this season, and the second year of Grow Cap. And I'm probably going to be doing that a couple of times just because he's so inspiring me. And you know the guy as well, David Thaddeus Karoma. Um, yeah, I'm kind of a fanboy of him. He's like a mentor to me. No, I'm not in love with him. I'm in love with a very special girl. But he's truly inspiring to me. And the other day, I think it was 2 weeks ago, he had another Zoom about taking breaks and why a lot of us are not able to do that. And it came back to us always feeling forced to please everybody else around us emotionally with the work we do in business or in relationships. And at some point, he became super emotional about it. And you got to imagine now the situation. There was about 3,000 people, I think, listening after 4 hours of him talking. It was 12 at night for him because he's now living in Dubai currently, 3 in the morning. And he was actually crying. And you see this guy, you know, he's almost like, he's more than, I think he's like 6'2", 6 feet, or like 2 meters, or however metrics you want to use. And he's this multi-millionaire listed in Forbes, being on the counseling board, and strong guy and super confident. And he's that confident actually that he opens up about his true emotions in front of so many people, because not because he wants any how do you say, like any pity, but because he is who he is and he's fine with that, because he knows that being true to yourself and true to your emotions is part of who you are. And yeah, I just want to have a quick opinion from you on what he did there. I told you about that, I think, and yeah, take it from there and take us
Yeah.
where your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. That's a great introduction. And I feel like I can kind of stem back to what you had been saying before, of like in terms of a relationship and how being friends, having an open relationship with somebody else allows for better connections and communication. Like the reason why we've stayed so close is because you and I aren't afraid to extend into more of an interconnected relationship and talk about our feelings and emotions. And sometimes with the stigma, when we had talked about this the past few days, of the stigma around like masculinity and hiding your emotions, is it's really a disservice to yourself if you're not really being truthful with your emotions. And it doesn't allow you to connect with those around you in the most effective way possible. So I think that the reason why you and I have stayed close and even though we're thousands of miles apart, is just because we're not afraid to show our real emotions. And as you provided with that example, it's important that not only of how much monetary value you own, or all these assets and whatever, all these properties, etc. It all stems back to who you are as a person, and like your deeper down, like your meanings of how you communicate with other people. And the best way to do that is to be truthful and open. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I just think that has so much more value than anything you could ever own,
Yeah, and that makes it understandable. You know what I mean? And it makes it kind of, you can grab that thought and that emotion, because a lot of people talking about like becoming your inner true self and meditation and everything, and that is all good. But I think that in the course of things, a lot of people forget what those people are actually talking about, because everybody's talking about it. And as with a lot of
Mm.
things, because we have this information overflow, people don't really think about it, what the experts, I would call them in that case, are actually saying. And you now said a couple of things, which I really liked and which I want to go into a little bit. You once said it's like you think that is, or you feel more like this is part of why our friendship is still so close. I would rephrase that and say that's why we're so close to each other, because opening up just builds a huge level of trust, and having a huge level of trust brings you back to that person, because you can call them in the middle of the night, which for us is usually perfect because we have a 6 hour time difference. And you can reach that person when everybody else around is asleep. Like that's the feeling I often had. It was like 2 in the morning, and I was super sad, or sometimes I was crying too, of course, or something I just had to figure out. And I knew like you were probably still awake, and you're probably also the perfect person to talk to. And also, I haven't heard from you in a while, so I'll give him a call. And most of the times, you would pick up, and that is so crazy to me, because it's like the most normal feeling in that case. But if you actually get out of that situation and you think about it, it's not normal at all. It's not granted that I am able to do something like that, which, of course, as I'm always telling you, comes with a huge amount of gratitude. And yeah, through that, you and me talking about that, we came to the topic that we want to address today, namely men, especially men, because of the stereotypical pressure, I guess, in society they have, just as women do as well. Both genders have their issues with society have to fight with. Today we want to talk about men and their emotions, and just in general of how it is connected to building connections in the workplace and business while traveling and everything. And how are you experiencing that in your job that you're doing as a nurse, and how did you um, experience that with making connections to other exchange students aside from me, or when you were traveling yourself
Yeah.
as a man?
Yeah. No. Yeah. For sure. Um, I feel like in terms of work, it allows, like in terms of when working in healthcare, it allows for me as somebody that cares for a patient to connect better with them, and allows for a more trusting relationship between the whole healthcare team with the patient, and it translates everywhere. Having an interconnected relationship, an interpersonal relationship like goes beyond just caring for somebody, in terms of like in entrepreneurship or business, allowing to have a more interconnected relationship with your colleagues or somebody you're trying to sell a product to. It doesn't matter what that is, having those emotions and having those feelings and building that trusting relationship will go a long way, and will allow for more open communication. And there's so much value in being open with somebody and showing that vulnerability, right? And as I was thinking of working in healthcare, patients are kind of at a vulnerable state and sick and on a road to trying to improve their health. And if I'm approaching a situation and approaching a relationship with a patient as a closed-minded and task-oriented, then how far am I going to get with that patient, and how much motivation is that going to have like push them to want to work with me, you know? So, and that, like I said, it translates everywhere. When I approach a patient, I approach them with open arms, metaphorically, you know, like I explain to them that I'm here to help them, and you know, I care for them, and whatever it takes we'll do to make sure that they're comfortable and they feel better. And that just establishes that right off the bat, that trusting relationship. And that can be found anywhere. And especially, like I said, in business, if you're working with somebody, like, especially with, I don't know, in sales, you want to have that connected and that close relationship with somebody you're trying to sell something to, because that will promote them to want to take your product. So it goes a long way just to show that the deeper the relationship and the deeper connection you have with somebody, the better outcomes are going to be. So you muted that.
Yeah. I just realized that I'm always trying to keep out the noise around me, because sometimes the houses in Spain have very thin walls, and our neighbors. Yeah, it's Tuesday, but there can always be a party, so it's just making sure. But that on the side. What I was actually going to ask you was, do you think that job you're now, you know, the practice you do every day, do you think that even helped you become even more sensitive as a person, as a man, to then be able to transfer that to other topics of your life?
For sure. Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point to make. Yeah. I think that it's promoted me to be, patients are in a vulnerable state, but it's allowed me to look at situations and how not vulnerable. I feel like that's taken as kind of a negative connotation, is makes you feel like you're weak, but being vulnerable allows you to like show your true emotions and show
Awesome.
if at times you're upset, you know what I mean? Like, it allows you to be more like, in situations and conversations with people, the more vulnerable and open you are with somebody, the deeper connection you'll have with them. The more
Yeah,
they'll want to
naturally.
show,
Yeah.
then the more they'll want to show, like, explain or go into more depth of their hobbies, etc. So
Yeah, 100%. And I think that what you just said with being vulnerable is super important, because, and that's the same thing I was saying about Thaddeus opening up in front of so many people. You know, I mean, I don't think he thinks of those thousands of people. He just like thinks of like talking to a certain person. Sometimes there's somebody sitting behind of the camera. Most of the times that he then talked to, who are involved in the conversation, he kind of just records himself while having that conversation. But I think that's what I meant at the beginning, that he showed that being vulnerable is okay, and showing that you're vulnerable, even though you have theoretically so much to lose with all your family and your assets, and so many people trying to attack you anyways, because you're on this stage all the time, and people just waiting for you to make mistakes. But you're that strong that you don't give a shit about that. And you don't have to be a famous person or a super successful person that has to deal with thousands of people every day, or that thousands of people approach every day. But it doesn't matter how famous you are. Opening up always takes bravery, and always takes an inner step to leave your comfort zone. And I think that a lot of us can learn about that, and especially men, just because of, if we look at how our emotions and hormones work, uh, women just have it easier to express their emotions, and men also. And it's also what he said in that Zoom. Men have sometimes difficulties dealing with the emotions of the woman, because they don't understand what is happening with their hormones or with their emotions. That sometimes they don't even understand themselves. But a lot of men are also not trying to understand, because they think it's not my problem. But in my opinion, in the moment you care about that person, you should also try to understand what's going on with her and how you can help her if possible. Because, you know, sometimes it's just a bad mood, it's just a bad situation. You just need to get through that day or that week, and then everything is fine again. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think like culture norms play a huge role into it too, you know, like everywhere. Yeah, you're like, I feel like it depends on how one perceives vulnerability. You know, everybody has a different definition of being vulnerable, but it also depends on like what your hobbies are. I feel like people may be less vulnerable if they're in a, like obviously in certain countries, some some males are more are told or are guided to be more masculine and more tough and don't show that aspect of it. But in turn, the only way you're going to be able to connect better with others is if you find that will and that power and bravery to kind of go over that barrier of that tough barrier and allow yourself to be vulnerable and show your true emotions. Because like I said, you're not being your truthful self, and you're 100% yourself if you're not showing your emotions, your values, to be 100% truthful with yourself, you have to show your emotions,
and I think
being vulnerable is the best way to do that.
And I think and that, like, vulnerable doesn't mean playing the victim, you know. That I think I'm always thinking, like, how could a person that is listening to this podcast or watching this podcast take or receive what you just said. I mean, of course, always the listener always interprets the message different than you say it most of the times, or at least you don't have any control over it. But what I think you were saying is that it's important to understand that vulnerable or being vulnerable doesn't mean you should play the victim, you know, not like trying to, get attention or take pity, but to just be honest. And if in that case, the best thing is to be vulnerable because you need to show somebody how you really feel, or you need to be honest about the mistakes you made, then that just makes you honest. Of course, there will be people taking advantage of it. Then you maybe need to be a little bit smart about it, who you're going to show it to. But then again, if you're not able to show that in that case, that for me would be another mission for me or a task for me then to find people I can actually show it to or share it with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of the work you've done, like kind of going back to your question and kind of swinging it your way, like in terms of you've done a lot of international business and you've traveled to Spain and you've came to America a few times. And do you feel like in terms of business aspects of it, do you feel like there's less room to work with your emotions? You know what I mean? If that's a
Yes,
good way to ask
100%.
it, or
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the best way, but if you want to take it from there.
I think I know what you mean. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe the exact question you want to ask or the terms you wanted to use will come back to you. But I think what it connects to what you were saying at the beginning, or what I was interpreting of what you were saying, is that you're kind of locking yourself or limiting yourself to something if you're not completely honest to yourself and your surroundings. And that is honestly, to me, and I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate to that, and I'm gonna shoot myself in the knee with that. If a certain people will hear that or hear me saying that, but what is annoying the shit out of me is that with a lot of people, you just can't be honest because of you being honest to them. They will take advantage of you or situation at hand and will turn it around to bite you in the ass. And coming to your question about international business, I think in every business in the world, no matter in what culture, in what industry, men are supposed to be strong. A lot of people would wish, I think, especially women, and I can understand that, is that men would be a little more vulnerable or a little more wholehearted, especially in their conversations. And I found that a lot of like women or girls were wondering why I would take so much time to listen to them. Not because I wanted, I wanted to have a date with them or want to, be with them in that way, but actually because I was interested in a person, or they would see me talking to another guy, that I was interested to talk to business about or about traveling, and they would be like, "Why? Like, it's crazy, like that you listen so much. I'm not used to that." And that's also, I think, for me, saying to other guys, like, take that time if you're really interested, because the amount of feedback and energy and information, also, if we just talk about information, if we just stay with business, it's amazing what you will get back, because there's nothing that people like more, most of the people, than talking about themselves, because usually they're afraid to open up because they think, yo, no one cares about me anyways, no matter if it's in a relationship or in business, so I can't do that. And I think with business, always have to be really careful, because either it's going to be taken as weakness, or they're going to get another kind of disadvantage of it, because those corporate cultures that tell you should be honest and you should show your true personality in order to actually have that true character that everyone wants to work with, to me that's a lie. Because if we then actually talk about open conversations, and I do that because I want to kind of provoke this theory they have and show them sometimes that they're lying to themselves if they tell me you can be open about anything. Because then you're open about almost everything. And then maybe at one point it's too much. And then they tell you, yeah, it probably would have been smarter if you didn't tell them that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of things where what is being said and in comparison to what is being done is a huge difference. And unfortunately, I've learned for myself that you need to be careful about who you're honest to and who you speak your mind to. But that also kind of, for me, makes it very interesting, because that challenges you, in my opinion, to be even more emotionally intelligent, to understand 100% who you have in front of yourself, and then to check. And that's nothing you can check with your brain, but you can only check that with your gut, your stomach, and your heart. That's actually a person you trust. And you always might be wrong, like it might always be like that the person is you think they're so trustworthy, and then they take advantage of you anyways. But that's just like with any other mistake that you make. Like the other day, I was recording a podcast with Dami, and we're talking about investing, and we said that through the only way to grow is through mistakes. And I think that's the same thing with being vulnerable. Like, you have to accept that you're going to have to make mistakes to get forward.
Yeah.
And that means trusting someone and being disappointed by them because they take advantage of you or they hurt you in some way. But then going through that pain and taking the learnings and the experience that you gained out of this is going to make you so much bigger at the end,
For sure. Yeah. The one word I really liked that you used was emotional intelligence, right? It goes back to how much effort you want to put into knowing yourself. The more you're able to connect with your own self and your own emotions is only going to allow you to connect with other people better. So it's really thought provoking to think about the norms and societal norms that we're kind of guided by, and how we're pretty much told, and through social media and whatever, how we're supposed to act and look and feel. And you're supposed to it's all you're supposed to feel how you're supposed to feel. You're not supposed to be guided in a certain direction based off of how other people feel. You're not going to be your true self if you're trying to follow somebody else's feelings or emotions. So
100%. And I think at a certain point, I know I'm gonna sound like an asshole on this, especially to a lot of people that are in this tough place of not being able to make that step yet to be vulnerable and to opening up. But at some point, you're just gonna have to make a decision. And for me personally, I made a decision. I want to build the life I want for myself. Again, I'm referring to the main core mission of this podcast, namely, which is to inspire people to do what they actually want to do. I want to take you on the growth ride in our cab, pick you, drop you off somewhere else, and hope that you have taken something that will inspire you or support you or remind you on what it is you actually want to do, and then find ways to accomplish that. And for me, one of the things that I mean when I talk about being self-dependent and being free it's not only financial intelligence and with that freedom, but also having the people around me that I enjoy spending time with and that I know I can open up to, and getting rid of all those people in business, in my surroundings, maybe also sometimes in family, that you feel like you can't be your true self to because they have expectations on you. They don't like a certain thing or a certain way you behave or a thing you do. And being able to pick who you hang out with and spend time with and give your energy to, that's a huge piece of freedom and self-dependence, in my opinion, as well. And that's the decision I made for myself. But I also know that there's a lot of people that have made the decision that the other person's opinion matters more to themselves than their own. But that, as you said, has nothing to do with being your true self.
Yeah,
right?
that was really well said. Yeah. I like, in terms of what you had said and what I kind of said prior, is like, it's interesting to see how much people will do to try to cover up their true emotions, and the people
Yeah.
they hang out with, and change how they present themselves. And it's like, people aren't being their true selves if they're trying to hide their emotions, and it's just not being 100% truthful.
Yeah. Yeah. I can only agree, and I think it's getting worse and worse for people to see the people's true self, to see just in general what's going on in the world, and what's actually the difference between truth and false information is getting harder and harder to identify. No matter if it's COVID, no matter if it's freaking war in Ukraine, or if it's just that one colleague you've been trying to figure out how he or she is working, or however, or what the reason is he or she is behaving towards you the way he or she does. And I think this is really interesting because it's just like a part of who we are as humans. We don't have this for nothing, this brain and this heart. But finding that connection in between, I think, is a life challenge that I think is worth for everybody to try to find their best way to deal with that. Coming to a cool end, because I think we have now plenty examples where you can find this. I think a lot of people can identify with what we're saying because they see it day to day. Some might might have gotten very good at ignoring it, but maybe they're being remembered about it. So what do you think? What are some tips or experiences or advice you would have, since you are obviously very good in expressing your emotions and dealing with that, and also of course using that to your advantage? What are some tips for people that listen to this, maybe reminding them of something they've already heard, but just like now getting it back into their heads, to build more truthful relations with yourself, with other people, to have maybe even just more wholehearted conversations? Just give us some advice from your experience.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it takes a lot of practice to really be vulnerable and to grow your emotional intelligence.
Consistency.
It takes with everything, and it takes practice to kind of master a certain task. And the more you practice, it's at first it seems a little overwhelming to be so like emotionally attached with somebody in a certain sense that you feel so open to talk to them. But the more you practice that, and the more people you have that connection with, the more I feel like gratitude you'll have. Kind of, that was a good word you used before, is like, I feel so grateful now to have the people around me that I know I can go to. I know I can go to you. I can go to my friends, my roommates, my friends at school, my friends from Guilford. It's all stems from having these open conversations about how I'm feeling. And it's just practice. Practice makes perfect, and it seems a little intimidating to say it that way, and it kind of puts more pressure. But just be open and free, and the more you practice vulnerability, the more freely you'll be able to talk with people. And have those open connections with someone. So
100%. Yeah, I couldn't say it any better. And I think this is a perfect way to end this podcast. Yeah, I'm super grateful to have you here today. I'm super excited to see you in a couple of months. We're gonna do another podcast episode when we see each other. So there's just gonna be one camera angle and you and me sitting next to each other. Can't believe that we're actually gonna see each other after how long has it been now? 3 years? Yeah, 3 years.
3 years, yeah.
Crazy times. A lot of things have happened. Yeah, guys, for everyone watching and listening, um, it comes from our heart that we want to tell you to just be more open and more honest to yourself, and also trusting yourself to be more open to people you love and you trust. And yeah, if you want to check if you can actually trust those people, be fully hearted and get out of your comfort zone, make yourself vulnerable, test it out. That's the only way to learn. Of course, have a little bit of logic, have a little bit of um, you know, emotional intelligence, as we said, and feel into if that is actually a person you want to spend time with and that you want to trust with the things that you do. Don't be too naive, but don't overthink it either. That it is from us. Thank you very, very much for this awesome talk. Once more, I will see you back in June on the podcast. Of course, we will see each other before that via FaceTime and everything. And I will see you guys in 2 weeks with our next weekly drive. See you guys.